I'd like to make a brief return visit to that playground of guilty white liberals, political correctness. Political correctness is America's newest form of intolerance, and it's especially pernicious because it comes disguised as tolerance. It presents itself as fairness, yet attempts to restrict and control people's language with strict codes and rigid rules. I'm not sure that's the way to fight discrimination. I'm not sure silencing people or forcing them to alter their speech is the best method for solving problems that go much deeper than speech.
There's two different things that are a problem here. Two very different things. There's the thing is people saying actual slurs, having mean intent, and being, an evil person with evil intent. Then there's also another thing going on where people just going after words and the use of words and trying to limit the use of words and trying to limit the language that we use, not the intent and not the thought behind the words, not the philosophy or the way of looking at life, which I think for most of us is constantly evolving and changing from the time we're younger to the time we're older. We learn life lessons along the way. We have fuck-ups. We make mistakes. We say things we wish we could take back. We say things
all the time.
And then we say things that we realize are cool. Well, when you add in those things together, you got a lot of different things going on. It's not just about the words themselves. What it's about is people having good intent. And there's a lot of people also, I think, that they use these words to inject some serious fucking hate and vitriol out into the world.
Yes.
They use other people using those words to be more hateful than the actual use of the word itself. The more angry, find, YouTube comments where people think they're being social justice warriors, going after someone, who might have used an incorrect term.
Yeah.
Or going after someone who said a disparaging thing about transgender people or whatever the fuck it is. And you're just going to find fucking anger and hate coming from people that are supposedly progressive on a scale that you rarely see even coming from people that are conservative.
So I think the differences between, there are three related terms here that I don't think have very much to do with one another. There's courtesy, there's racism, and there's political correctness. Now, courtesy describes a set of codes that we all use to navigate the world successfully and to communicate with one another. The reality is that we're all a little bit sexist and we're all a little bit racist. Everybody is, to larger and lesser extent. Now, the left believes that you can stamp that out by policing language. They think that if you change the words you use for things, that you can change reality. Well, you can't. You can't make people unracist by banning the N-word. You can't stop people being homophobic by banning school children from using the word gay in the playground. That's not how it works. So the purpose of a civilized society is for all of us to enable all of us to live together in harmony and to communicate with one another and to successfully build businesses and have interpersonal relationships with one another despite our limitations and our bigotries, and not to try to stamp them out. Now, that's what we call courtesy or etiquette and politeness. Racism is something different. The N-word is racism. That doesn't really fall into that bucket, which is presumably the main word that you were referring to. Political correctness is something a bit different. Courtesy and consideration, politeness, etiquette, we use to navigate the world so as not to run up against other people unnecessarily. We use it as social lubricant. But political correctness is a bit different. Political correctness seeks to reduce the scope of acceptable thought and language in order to guide discussion in a particular ideological direction. So when, for example, feminists want to ban particular words, or political correctness takes on its other weird manifestation, enables you to say what are effectively bigoted and racist things about particular groups, like the straight white man of mythology, who, according to all the data, is doing really badly, according to the media and liberal groups on campus, is ruling the world. Well, the patriarchy is not doing a very good job, if that's the case. Because young white boys are being thrown on Ritalin and Adderall when they're in school. At college, they're subject to consent classes that tell them they're all potential rapists. When they get into the workplace, they're 2-to-1 discriminated against in STEM fields. Women will get jobs just for being women. If there is a patriarchy, it's not doing a very good job. And political correctness seeks to hide these things from us. It's a kind of elaborate form of lying, which uses language in order to close off certain avenues of debate. Now, no one's going to argue with you, sir, that nobody should be using the N-word, but there are all sorts of other things that go on that are designed to limit the acceptable bounds of speech and thought. And that's, for example, the trigger warning and safe space culture. That is political correctness in action.
There was actually something else at work, and something that really exposes the rot that the regressives are causing in our society. Part of me was actually afraid that if I spoke to Tommy, regardless of whether he really is a bigot or not, that I also would be labeled a bigot. Let me repeat that. I feared that just by having a conversation with someone, just by hearing their views on this show as I do every week, that I would then get one of those awful labels that people throw around, thrown on me. After a couple days of thinking about it, I realized that not only did I have to do the interview with Tommy, but my fear was the exact reason that I had to do it. The chilling effect that words like bigot and racist have are not just on the person at who they are aimed, but they're also used to stop other people from talking to them. The less we talk, the more the authoritarians can move in with easy answers. Once I really wrapped myself around that, it was a no-brainer. Like all my guests, I'll let Tommy's ideas be heard, and you, the audience, will be the judge. Ironically, if the left had been more honest about the dangers of Islamism all along, I would feel less of a need to have conversations like this, but they refused to, so here we are. If his ideas are good, then let them spread. If they aren't, then let them be beat by better ideas.
But effectively what it means for those of you who, and I hope everyone's read the books, those of you who haven't read those books, there's a bad guy in the Harry Potter books called Voldemort that people, the two things. First of all, they deny he exists, and they're also, while denying that he exists, because he's meant to be dead, but he actually isn't really dead. The second thing is they're too scared to name him. So instead what they say is, he who must not be named is dead. Now, I took that and said, look, that Voldemort effect, being too scared, too petrified to name the problem when actually it's staring at you in the face, is what's happened with Islamist extremism. And the problem is we have been unable to name the problem, led by President Obama himself all the way down. Whereas actually recently, Prime Minister Cameron, not least because we've been working through Cuillin very hard to advise him on this, but among many others, has named the Islamist ideology just last month in his speech and his intervention on this debate. I'm hoping the next president of the US does the same. What's the problem with not being able to name the problem? There are two problems here. External to Muslims and within Muslim communities. If we can't name Islamist extremism and we just say the ideology of extremism, the problem is that outside of Muslim communities, many non-Muslims will assume you're talking about Islam, the religion itself, and all Muslims. That's the first problem, because by not naming it, you're blurring those lines, and you're increasing the obfuscation. And trust me, there are a whole bunch of nut jobs out there who would take delight, who would take pleasure in stigmatizing every single Muslim, which Sam doesn't do, nor does Ayan. They don't do that. I've personally spoken to both of them about this, and in many instances watched their speeches. But there are plenty of people out there that would like to do this. So that's danger number one. By not naming it and isolating it from the religion, you're blurring those lines and making it easier for people to blame every single Muslim. The danger within Muslim communities is that by not naming the problem, we are disempowering the voices of those reforming Muslims who are attempting and struggling, who are vulnerable within their own communities and who are struggling to bring about that reform dialogue within Muslim communities. We are disempowering their voices. We are not allowing them to make the case within the religion of Islam to say the problem isn't Islam, fair enough, but there is something we have to address. And that something is this Islamist ideology that has hijacked our voice. But actually by depriving them of that language, what are they left to say? How are they meant to have that debate? And instead what happens is every gay Muslim, every feminist Muslim, every liberal Muslim, every dissenting voice is silenced, is shut down, is stigmatized, and those who shout the loudest are the ones dominating the discourse. And then we complain when mainstream society says, where are the moderates? We're not even giving them a lexicon to have this conversation.
Sam, did you want to pick up on that?
Yeah, well, I think we should be candid about how depressing the state of the conversation is around this conversation. Because, for instance, I think at one point you said to me that you either expected or in fact were receiving more criticism from with regard to talking to me than talking to Islamists or even
Absolutely,
jihadis.
yeah.
So he could go and talk to a failed suicide bomber, right?
And everyone's happy.
And that's completely legitimate use of his time, and of course we need to have conversations. How else could we move forward? But talking to famous atheist over here, that's as controversial as it gets. And that is of a piece with this liberal or pseudo-liberal criticism that both of us are getting on this topic, where people can't seem to see that, for one, that we're talking about ideas and their consequences. And everything we say about Islam or Islamism or jihadism, or depending on what the focus is, conservative Islam, applies to white converts to the faith, and it applies to people in 100 different countries and of a wide variety of ethnicities. If ever I say something disparaging about Islam compared to Hinduism or Buddhism, well, then that has nothing to do with racism or the colors of people's skin. I mean, racism and bigotry against people based on ethnicity or the country they're born, that has nothing to do with this conversation at all. And so this meme of Islamophobia that has been thrown up to prevent conversations of this kind is really quite destructive. And it's something that, I mean, the hypocrisy here should be just shattering to liberals in particular, because you have, as Maajid just said, we are abandoning the women and the freethinkers and the gays and the public intellectuals and the apostates these are the most vulnerable people on earth in Muslim societies, where you have atheist bloggers, or not even atheist bloggers, just secular bloggers.
People like Raif Badawi.
Getting hacked to death, and liberals are not only not giving them any tools by which to better their lives, they are castigating the people who are trying to shine a light on the disproportionate nature of the problem here. To be gay, or even a woman in a country like Afghanistan, or Saudi Arabia, or Bangladesh, I mean, these are unlucky places to be in a minority of that kind. And so it's as we argue at some length in the book, liberalism has really failed us here. And it's not, and you can criticize Christianity all you want, and liberals will never bat an eye. You can criticize Mormonism all you want, but the moment you try to shine a light on the problem of, I think, appropriately described as Islamism for this conversation, just the full armamentarium of political correctness and cries of racism just hits you full in the face, and it is a thankless job. Nobody wants to do this. Nobody wants to have this conversation because it is so poisonous, especially on college campuses.
This is precisely how totalitarian anti-liberal ideologies flourish. Number one, if they can, in certain places in the world, they simply literally behead you. Say the wrong thing and you're dead. Now, in the West, you can't do that yet. But what you can do, you could behead them in other ways. You could behead them by stifling them through various non-violent means. You could harm somebody's reputation. So Richard Dawkins, many of you know him, right? You can't behead him in the West, but you certainly can try to tar him. You could try to make him out to be a neo-Nazi, hateful, racist bigot. He's none of those things. He's about as liberal as you can get. You could go for Sam Harris and say that he is a Dr. Mengele, Hitler-type guy. He's none of those things, right? And of course, you could create a climate of fear where you just censor yourself. And then that's it. We don't have to worry about you saying anything that is against our ideology. Healthy societies, I don't mean to moralize, but it's very important, especially in the context of the Institute for Liberal Studies, to remind people of these. Healthy societies are precisely those that are unapologetically free. That's how you establish that a society is healthy. When you go to see your physician, there are a few very quick metrics that he or she can take to determine your sort of basal level of your health, right? Let's check your weight, let's check your blood pressure, let's do a quick blood work to see your cholesterol score, let's check your blood sugar, and hopefully we have a good baseline to know if you're heading down the right path. Well, if you want to do a similar quote, medical test on societies, look to see how free they are, how much economic, political, religious, sexual, reproductive freedom, and so on They have. All of those freedoms, none of them can happen, none of them can be protected without freedom of speech. That's the one from which everything else flows. What political correctness does is it attacks that fundamental freedom. It is an affront to freedom of speech to be constantly shackled by the fears imposed upon us by the politically correct thought police.